Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's FPV Podcast. This week, we're doing something a little bit interesting. We're actually going to be talking about an app, but it's very innovative. It actually kind of brings the community together at a racing event, and it's all-inclusive. It's very productive, and we really want to talk about it. But before we get into the topic, Elvin, what do you got this week?
Me? Little old me?
All right, moving on.
Oh, my goodness. I hope everybody's having fun. Up here in the Northwest, it's snowing pretty much every day, and that means no school for the kids, which is normal up here, 1 inch, and the whole city shuts down. I just want to say, hey, get out there and fly in the snow, guys. I want to see some of these videos of these amazing skills that you have in the snow. Get out there, pop them up on our Facebook page, Instagram, tag us to it. I want to see some of this stuff, man. Show it up, blow it up, boom.
All right.
Up to you, Juan.
All right. Let's go ahead and introduce our two guests today. Marty, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, guys. Thanks for having us on today. I'm Marty Wetherall. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hydra FPV. We're really excited to be talking about what we're doing on the show today.
All right. There we go. We have the CEO on, so we got the head honcho. Joel, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Joel Stewart. I'm the Chief Technical Officer of Hydra and one of the original co-founders as well. So two head honchos.
Two head honchos, CTO and CEO. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. How did you both of you get into FPV?
Well, I can start with that. My background is actually in film and television. I went to film school, got into advertising for a while, was always a big sports fan, athlete, sports fan, always very big into sports. So actually did a sports TV show, film, television, advertising, sports. And then I also got into the startup space during my advertising career and didn't really have a technical background, but got into sort of the leadership role in a couple of startup efforts. So that's what I was before I discovered FPV. When I first saw FPV, it was actually at my partner Joel's office. I was invited to come check out a little tiny whoop meetup. I was immediately captivated. And what struck me, I didn't even fully realize it at first, but what struck me was, here is a sport, it's a racing sport, but it has video cameras built in. My two worlds were converging. My film and television background and my sports background, here they were completely mashed up. And I thought, this is really interesting. There is something here that I need to pay attention to. I knew Joel a little bit. Primarily, we had a mutual friend who had invited me to his place that night. I'll let him tell you about, how he got started holding those meetups. But I saw it at his office for the first time and was immediately smitten.
Immediately hooked. All right, Joel, how did you reel him in?
How did I reel him in? Yeah.
Was that a number 4 treble hook? Did you use
Only did a 30-pounder.
Yeah, because he looked like a buck 25.
Right. So yeah, my background is more engineering and technical. Mostly in software engineering is my day job, but I would tinker and play around in a lot of hardware and double E electronical engineering and some mechanical and different things for client work, because I'm just a contractor by day. Drones have always been kind of fascinating and fun to watch. And so eventually stuff got to the point where it was affordable to, you could buy something just to tinker and play without really spending the farm, basically, to get in. FPV really was kind of the marriage of everything I loved. It took, esports, concepts, video game, a controller that fits in your hand, mixed with mechanical and electrical engineering and software engineering. I could, customize the firmware, tooling sets on the computer, configuration. It was just basically this giant mix of everything that I loved about everything, and put it into a nice little package that I could fly around my office. And so started having kind of a weekly race at my office. Fortunately, there was like an abandoned office room across the hall from where I was working. And so I asked the landlord if I could just set up basically a permanent whoop course And so had had a whole bunch of stuff set up, and we would go there and just fly around in circles for 3-4 hours once a week, which was just brilliant, for that time. Started there, and then that's kind of how I got started, and was started to drag in a bunch of my friends into it, and Marty came along, and one of the things I was working on at the time when we started this was really trying to actually add a little bit of competition to it. The timing systems were out there, but they were still early, a little flaky, and the ones that were really good were really expensive. So it was like
still are, right?
Yeah,
still
like $1,000 to track your quads going around a course, or I think the race tracker was about to come out. There was a few other similar race tracker products. Immersion RC Lap RF was still not quite out. It was still kind of on the horizon. And so, putting my skills to work, I started tinkering with my own, open source versions, kind of what would have been like a parallel to the Delta 5 before it really, established itself as well. So I was working on all these things, trying to add some timing systems, and then I'm not a Windows guy. I'm kind of an Apple guy. No, Windows is fine. No, I'm not going to start that argument here today. But there was no software solution out there that really could handle a lot of this for us as well. I mean, I couldn't just pull up my phone, connect it to something, and have it track the timings of what's going on, in a very reasonable way. And so started looking at all the different open source stuff, put stuff together, and eventually had a couple different prototypes for tracking quads as they flew around my office. I was looking at, making all the gates change colors because I wanted to have it be like a smart course, which we'll talk about later on, around where some of this is headed. But I had all this together, and eventually Marty and another guy kind of came together and said, this is a really innovative area. A lot of things still have to be done to really fully realize and establish this as a mainstream sport. Do you have any interest in turning your hobby into a company? It took me a while to come around to the idea, but I think it was probably like 3, 4, 5 months after talking, we finally put everything down and made it happen. So yeah, that's kind of the origin story of Hydra there. So
okay, I want to say something. He said it took 4 or 5 months. Like, he thought about it, literally thought about it. Like most guys just jump in, right? And you want that enthusiasm when the guy is willing to jump in, but you want that thought process in the end. You want that long, arduous. What can I provide for the team? What am I an advantage? Am I a disadvantage? Am I in the end going to be an advantage, or is it going to be a disadvantage toward my family too? Because, you're giving up your free time and effort, and all of that plays an effect on how, they say a happy wife makes a happy life. Well, you got to be home to do that. So,
it is.
How's that working out for you guys?
I've been around the block a few times with startups. I've been burned. I've watched boards blow up my companies, and watched millions of dollars disappear in smoke, in a matter of seconds with bad CEOs and bad decision making. So was very, very much putting the brakes on anything that was going to come out fast, especially since it was my hobby and it was my playtime. It was the stuff I loved to do. I didn't want to quickly turn it into a company to have it blow up on me and I'd lose my hobby.
True.
Completely understand that.
Don't want to ruin this, And I had to go through a little bit of vetting time with Marty and the other guy to make sure that, we were compatible working together. You spend a lot of time with this individual, and, there can be a lot of ego in these types of things, and making sure that our ego is aligned, basically. So
that's a great thing to have.
Marty can speak to that on his side as well.
Yeah, I think, both Joel and I have been involved in multiple startups. I believe ideally, a co-founder is someone you've known for a long time, and you've been through some things, so you are ready for all the things you're going to go through in a startup situation. That's not always a luxury that you have. Joel and I knew of each other. We both gave it a lot of thought before jumping in on this. We knew there was something we didn't necessarily even have a clear concept of what it was going to be. We just saw so much potential. And after kicking it around for a while, we found enough chemistry to say, all right, yeah, let's go into this space and figure it out. And let's just start trying stuff. Joel was explaining all the things that he had already begun to kind of tinker with. And he is a unique individual. He is a technical genius. He is faster than anyone I've ever seen. He can try stuff.
Not flying. I'm not a good pilot. Speed here.
He's an okay pilot. But the ability for him to quickly try what we're imagining has been a huge strength of where we've been and how far we've come. It was something that when we all agreed to get to it, we made the time. And I mean, what better thing to be putting your efforts toward than something that is so fun and is your hobby, but also something that you can, turn into a business. So
yeah, that's really interesting.
Right.
And, having spoken to both of you a little bit, I think all of us here are entrepreneurs to one degree or another, and all of us have dabbled in it. And one of the hardest things to do is finding the right team. And, your two skill sets naturally are very good for each other because they're, in different segments, and being able to, do separate things, but being able to work together really well definitely is at the core of making a great company. And, I think you guys definitely have a product here that a lot of people would appreciate and would love to use. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. I'll ask the simple question. What is Hydra?
Well, we started looking down a few paths. Eventually, we just started putting on races. We wanted to see what this thing was. And I want to preface this by saying that I am not really a pilot. Now, eventually, I'm going to have to learn how to fly a lot better. But I did not come to this project. I explained how I came. I showed up at a night where guys were flying, and I just loved what I saw, but I didn't come as a pilot. So I have maintained a really unique perspective that I didn't realize how unique it was. Just about everybody in this space flies, but I come from film and TV and entertainment. What Hydra FPV is an entertainment company and a technology company. We call it Drone Racing Entertainment Tech. We provide tools that we built for our own purposes to manage races. So race management, including live streaming, because live streaming is the way that you scale this only sport with cameras built in, right? So it's naturally live streamable. I amaze all my production friends by saying, hey, we live stream this thing. We don't bring a camera crew. We don't have to bring a camera crew. Cameras are built in. We got drones and phones, and that's our camera crew right there, right? So that alone is something that we are figuring out and making available through our tool set. But more than just race management, it's fan engagement. Fan engagement. I am a fan of this. I wanted to make it watchable and enjoyable because I don't fly, but I saw all the potential in how enjoyable it could be. Joel does fly, but together we've been able to look at this from a unique angle. And the more we've met other people, the more we've gotten out into the world. We were just doing this thing in Minneapolis, right? We were putting on these races. We weren't hiding in the back room. We weren't asking for permission to fly after hours. We're like, hey, we want to put on a show. We want to put on a drone race. We're going to have these little drones. Now, of course, we're in Minnesota, right? So we started doing this in the winter, and that means it's tiny whoop season. We can be all around them. We don't have to stay a safe distance away. So we started putting on races, and we said, we're going to bring a race here, and we're going to take the video that the pilots are watching in their goggles. We're going to put it up on the screens. And so everybody can see these things flying around, and they can see what they see. And tap rooms and bar owners were like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. And it was a show. It was a main attraction from the very beginning, the way we were doing it. And so we built all the tools, do that for ourselves. We designed them to be something that other people can use. And we're getting to that point now. And then we designed the whole show to be something that fans could really enjoy. And what that's led us to is not only a really great live streaming package. That content goes up at the screens at the venues. It goes out on all the major platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. But we also realized that beyond that first excitement of seeing drones racing, that fades. We saw it firsthand. The novelty wears off. So how do you get people to continue staying excited? Well, you got to give them rooting interest. And so we started in a very primitive offline way, getting people to pick pilots. Who do you think is going to do the best job? And that led to our app, the Hydra FPV app, which is basically, right now, it's fantasy drone racing. You can now play fantasy drone racing. You can pick pilots on a heat-by-heat basis. You can get points for picking well. Those points translate to prizes. And now you got people who are never going to be pilots. You got senior citizens and T-ball teams and biker bar patrons. And these are all people are all cheering their lungs out for the drone races because they made picks. we tell people about that, and they just are like, really? Like, oh, don't you need to fly to appreciate it? I'm like, no, not if you're picking. And so our platform does all that. It's race management, fan engagement, and the fantasy side has really been taken off.
I just think it's funny. There's a story behind each of those groups that he mentions. You know, from the senior citizens to the T-ball teams. But it's been one of the most interesting and fun elements is watching non-pilots really get an understanding and appreciation for the sport, even though they've never picked up a controller, have never flown. You know, through the process of iteration and consistency with, you know, different venues, we've been able to establish best practices for putting on a drone race that appeals to fans, not pilots. It appeals to fans. And so I think it's worth clarifying right now. Probably most pilots are going to be listening to this podcast. When we talk about a race, it's not going to be the type of race that they are accustomed to, especially when it comes from multi-GP. All multi-GP races, or most of them, use kind of like a laps in time format. So you get 2 minutes, get as many laps as you can. You get to finish your last one when the buzzer goes off, and the person who got the most laps wins, and the tiebreak is the person who did the most laps in the fastest time. Sad to say, it's completely unwatchable for a fan. They have no concept of when the race is over. They have no understanding of who's in first place and who's in last place. There's no attachment to, you know, crucial moments. And usually that may come around like at the multi-GP championships where you get to like the top 16 and you get into a bracket, then you can do a heads up format. But for the most part, you don't see those formats until the very end.
True. And
so when we started doing our races, we held what you would normally think of when you think of a race. The time, you know, the light turns green, we all fly around a course, and the first one to finish the course wins. That's the race, you know.
Finish line.
Yeah, we have a finish line format. And so, you know, on top of it, so that was one of the lessons we learned was very quickly we had to move away from a more traditional multi-GP times and laps format and move to something that fans and spectators could really understand. So we've experimented a whole lot with different formats around that. We're still actually tinkering with a few new ones, which we may or may not talk about here. But, you know, so there's that. And then, you know, Marty kind of mentioned that you have to have like that rooting interest. There's more to the rooting interest than just, you know, saying, I think red's going to win. One of the things that we really try to do when we hold a race up here in Minnesota or other venues that we're spinning up is we need to establish who the pilots are. Like if you watch football or something, you know, when you watch after the first down, they always do the full lineup of the defense, and you get a player by player, breakdown of everyone, where they came from, what school, what their history is, how tall, their stats, you know, how old they are, all this fun information that helps you hopefully establish a connection with one of the players in the game. That way you can pick them out like, oh, I really like that guy. He's from my alma mater. I'm totally cheering for him for the rest of the night, right? And so that was also lacking. If you were to watch, or if you can still watch a lot of FPV videos, races online, you very rarely see a pilot's headshot. You very rarely know their name. You very rarely know where they're from, what they're flying. You know, and if you look in the chat of all of these, you know, FPV races online, the number one question is, what are they flying?
Who's that?
Yeah, who's that? Who is that? What are they flying? You know, where can I get that? How do I, you know, how did they get to that point, right? It's a constant question that comes up every single time. And it's like, why is this, hello, like, wake up, people. Like, we need to be providing this information up front. And like that connection is something we really strive to work on and, you know, put forward as part of our tool set is this needs to be more than a race. It needs to be a production. What's the minimal amount of effort we need to do to make this to where we can overcome that hurdle of not being connected to the pilots? So that's really one of the things that, it's out there.
I'm glad you touched on that, Joel. You know, we started last winter putting on races. So the end of 17, beginning of 18. And we were putting on races here and there, about one a month, but we weren't really able to apply the things we were learning readily because we were kind of waiting too long between events. So this past summer in a suburb of Minneapolis called Fridley, we found a biker bar that had a stage for bands, and we set up a weekly race night, Tuesday night drone racing. And they promoted it a little bit, but most people were surprised to see us. And yet we got them interested. And what was great about this place is they offered up some specials and some deals for what people could win if they were picking the winning pilots. So our format, as Joel mentioned, we design everything to make it consumable and enjoyable for the spectator. So, and we were racing every week, and it was summer, and people like to be outside of Minnesota, and we were racing indoors. So we couldn't count on getting a whole lot of pilots every week. So we just said, all we need is 4 pilots. Give us 4 pilots. We'll race them across several race heats. Everybody will get to know these pilots, right? Because there's only 4 of them. Not a huge number of people to try to keep track of. So we created these, we call them baseball cards, but basically we created these digital bios, headshots with basic information, hobbies, hometown, eventually equipment. And before the race started, we would just loop them, one at a time on all the screens at this biker bar. And I'd go around and I'd say, take a look at these pilots. Now you get to pick which one you think is going to do best tonight. And I'll give you a ticket. Each pilot had a color, one of 4 colors. I had a ticket in each color. I went around and said, who do you think is going to do best? And here's why you want to do it. Because if your pilot wins heat number 1, you get $1 off drink. And if your pilot wins heat number 3, you get a half-price pizza. And they had really good pizza there. And then they had half-price appetizers for heat number 5 and so on. So didn't cost anybody anything to play. Got everybody to, hey, just take one. It doesn't cost anything, right? And all of a sudden, they have rooting interest. Right. But it was those bios that we knew we had to put those out there because people had to make a decision. Now, some people just like the color blue, right?
Right.
Some people like the hometown of that guy,
right.
Or the fact that we had a 10-year-old one night flying and they liked the kid, right? So we were informing people whether they were ready for it or not, whether they wanted it or not. They started looking at these people and they got to know them a little bit. And so all of that played into how we made this, hobby that was behind closed doors into something that we could put on a stage and people would get into. And now that's all available in the app. So all the pilots who've ever flown in any of our events are in the app. You can tap on their names if you find them in a race they've flown and get all that information as much as they put in. Some guys don't, go and fill out every field, but it's all in there. And I want to clarify something else that, we're putting on these races here in Minnesota. We've begun to bring our system out. We were at the Tiny Whoop Invitational at Jesse's place in January, met Chris Thomas there, got invited out to MultiGP in Vegas. A lot more people found out about who we were, but we're not trying to create a league called Hydra FPV. We're creating a system, and that system can be used by every league and every race organizer. So that's an important point. This is something that Joel and I don't want to be putting on all these races. We're going to put on some races, and we're going to continue to put races on in really cool places. But we are designing the system to scale so that everybody who wants to put on an event with all this fan engagement and all the things we've learned can do so.
Okay, that's really interesting. And that's like a wealth of knowledge right there that both of you have talked about. I'm going to try to sum it up and you can tell me where I'm wrong, okay? So this is going to be the game, and I'm going to try to do it in under 2 minutes. So what I've heard is that you guys are producing basically a complete event management system specifically for drone racing. Where you differ from a lot of other people is that you're not only thinking about how to produce the event in terms of the racing, but you're also doing something that all the other systems lack since 2015, since when me and Elvin were talking about it, which is you're thinking about fan engagement and really how to actually keep the hype going for the entire event. This is something that we've been lacking for 3 years, probably more.
Yeah.
And it's something...
4 now. 4.
Yeah, and it's something that's very interesting because we've never had a company or actually a group, organization, whatever you want to call it, that's actually thought about it in this way and is trying to produce a system like this. How am I good? Am I good so far?
We've talked about it. Me and Wyatt, we've talked about this and with some other people too, talk about how, they need to develop the pilots and, how do you get more people to engage and be interested in the pilot's bio. It was really cool to see that DRL actually did that this time. They brought the pilots out. They had to talk about, they showed their face. They showed where they were from. A couple of little knickknacks that gave people some kind of engagement to attach to, what they flew, where they came from, this, the city, the state, blah, 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 blah. But I think this is a great way to do this because we just don't have enough information about who is flying. I mean, really, this guy shows up at most of the time a guy shows up at a race and we don't have a clue and they end up in first place, right? And then everybody's like, well, who's this guy? Like, what, and, it don't take long to get that information out there, really, though.
It's very true. A couple of other things before we moved on. It's really interesting in the fact that sometimes you need to be outside the box in order to bring something very innovative inside the box. And that's kind of where I think Marty comes in, because when he looks at, the framing of this event, he's looking at it from, I'm a spectator. I was like, what do I need to do to actually enjoy myself? I'm not seeing it. Therefore, I am going to introduce that into the system. Whereas there's still a whole, let's face it, drone racing is a very technical sport. There's a lot of things that have to go right for an event to actually go off seamlessly. And that's kind of where, Joel comes in, because we've been to so many events, and till this day, there's not been an event that starts on time and mostly ends on time. It's very hard, especially big events, right? Small events, they can start on time and end on time. You get over 50 people, good luck with that. So It's super interesting that you guys are tackling this. And before we actually get into more details of that topic, do you guys have more to your team besides you two? I just want to introduce them if they exist.
Yeah, our other co-founder is Matt Otterstatter. He's also up here in the Twin Cities with us. Mm-hmm. We have worked very closely with the multi-GP chapter here in the Twin Cities called the Mighty Drones. They have an amazing chapter president, Paul Flint, a very engaged chapter. And I'd like to say that they have gotten stronger thanks to us putting on our races around town, because they've been able to recruit people that have been coming to our races. Again, we're doing this for spectators. So we've seen a few people start as spectators and then become pilots racing in our events and becoming Mighty Drones members. I definitely want to give a shout out to all the pilots here in town who have raced in our races and allowed us to figure out the things we figured out along the way. So the company itself is Joel and Matt and myself, the three original co-founders. Matt has a really interesting background. He's actually got an aerospace background. He's been an investor in startups. He also happens to be quite a knowledgeable sports bettor. So we can talk more about that. But we've also found some other folks in our journeys. A couple of guys in Colorado. I'll let Joel talk about them, but we've been starting to jam with some other folks as well.
So a lot of the early stuff I'd done with Hydra, or even before Hydra was a thing, was a lot of hardware focused. And I've done hardware in a couple different startups, and the thing about hardware is that it's hard. It's very hard to make money doing hardware as well, and you can talk to a newbie drone in particular. They're doing a great job at it, but they're not driving their Lamborghinis or anything around town. I guarantee that. Right. It is not a lucrative business. It is needed, but it is tough. And so when we went into Hydra, there was obviously going to be some requirements for hardware for what we were trying to do, but I was determined to get it to where I could use off-the-shelf components, because I didn't want to have to go back to China to try and do more manufacturing of custom stuff if I could help it. So that's where we're at right now, is that the majority of our stuff is almost all off-the-shelf hardware. I'm not trying to sell you another box. I'm just going to tell you what box to buy. True. And I'm going to try and support as many boxes as feasible, right? That said, there's going to always be kind of that high production quality that's not going to be achievable with an off-the-shelf component. And so when we were in Colorado at the Tiny Whoop Invitational, I don't know if you guys have seen the videos, but I was just blown away by their course design. The brains that they had going on building all of those course elements, from the gates to the tunnels to everything, was just genius. And one of those guys, his name's Dean Nicholson, is mostly responsible for that. And what's funny about Dean is I'd actually reached out to him about 6 months earlier. He had put up this a Kickstarter for his Tiny Whoop gates, which were basically labeled as smart gates. So, the RGB LEDs, all programmable, and then they were going to have timing systems and tracking systems in them as well to enable a whole bunch of different types of gameplay and other things, which was always like on my dream wish list. Like, I want a really smart course I can play around with in software to enable more than just racing around a track. I want to have capture the flag. I want to have, command and control. I want to have lights out, all these different types of gameplays. And I found it, and the company was called Bright Blue Tech, BBT. So you've probably seen maybe some BBT gates. You can go look them up. But Dean was the brains behind that. And due to some life circumstances, the Kickstarter didn't go through, and it kind of fizzled out. But I was determined to try and, get a hold of him, whatever. Well, 6 months later, I show up at the Invitational, and there he is, like putting the course together. I'm like, Dean, we need to talk. You and I, we are on the same wavelength right now on what we want to do. You're doing the hardware. I don't want to do it. Let's talk about this. So, after the Invitational, after Dean and then his business partner Taylor Worthington, they saw, what we were doing. Taylor was the guy who was actually behind the mic at the Invitational, and he was running our software. And by the end of it, he was a pro, and just basically doing everything. I just sat there and observed in, giddy, like somebody's using my stuff. It's really great. But those two we really got kind of, fell in love with them. And so there's some announcements to come, I think, in the coming days. But those two guys are genius and well worth, following and getting in tune with, because they're very, very smart individuals. So,
yeah. And if you get our app, there's a full schedule of all the events that are using our system in the Hydra FPV app, and you'll notice some events happening in Colorado. Joel and I are not there in person for those. Dean and Taylor are running those events, and beginning to show how the system is not something that we have to be there managing in person. It's something that we're going to be sharing with others, and they can run with.
See, this is the mark of a very talented team, is that they know what their weak spots are, and instead of learning it, because there's no time to learn it, they just acquire the resources needed to actually do it. I learned that the hard way. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the actual management systems, because there is a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of pitfalls when you actually go into designing software to manage systems. A lot of people do it, and they end up with a lot of hours of doing stuff and not a whole lot of people wanting to use it. So let's get into why people want to use your product. How did you design it in a way where it's also fun for people managing the race, but it's also engaging for the audience that's watching the race? So I guess I'll let you take it away, Joel.
For you audio only, you're not going to be able to see this, but I did pull up what is our director software, as we call it. And it is an iPad app. And so our penultimate goal here is to be able to put on this entire production with nothing more than an iPad, the timing system, which we'll maybe talk about in a minute here, which is where Dean comes into play, and an internet connection, and your phones, basically. So everything else, you don't need the laptops, you don't need multiple OBS, live streaming software. You don't need any of that. Just need an iPad. That's it. And so that's really where we've been heading. People ask why iPad, why not a desktop? And it's like, because an iPad is $250, and a $250 computer is a paperweight. so
it's not a computer.
It's not a computer. I don't know what that is, but it's not something we can actually use. So, and again, I'm an Apple guy. So I'm going to go through, let's head down to like our practice. So the system is pretty straightforward. We have a full thing of races in here going back to when we started using it last summer. So it can handle a lot, but there is a huge race configuration screen, everything from just the basics, name, date, location, all the way out to the engagement configuration, where you specify how many points a fan will get when they open the race on their app. And those are the points they're going to use to, pick different pilots, and they're going to spend them in different ways to try and accumulate more points. And we can set all of that inside here. We can even go through and configure some of the hardware side of things to where we need to set up we want to make a connection between that video that's coming in over FPV. We need to somehow get it into the iPad as well, which is a monumentally difficult task. I'm not going to go into the number of iterations I've gone through over the last year and a half to make this happen in a performant way that I'm happy with. And honestly, I didn't figure it out until literally a week before Vegas, the championships. So that's how it took me a year and a half. And then I finally found the right stuff to make it happen and quickly banged out some code that made it all work. And I've been just living on cloud 9 since then. And problem solved. Been one of those days. But you can set everything up in there. Then we have a full pilot interface where I can add my pilots. I have 59 pilots in here. This was the first day, so we had 59 pilots racing at the championships. This wasn't a team-based event, and teams is a new concept we're adding in, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But otherwise, you're in the simulator right now, so you don't get to see the QR code scanning. But basically, to join a race, you just pull up the app, you tap on your player icon in the app, and it pulls up a QR code, and we just come up and scan it, and you're in the race. So very simple. So no searching, none of that stuff.
One thing to mention is that for a pilot to be in our system, they have to get the app and they have to create a profile. There were 150 pilots at MultiGP, so running around and making sure they all had the app was fun. But for any of you pilots out there that want to race in one of our races, go ahead and get the app now. It helps. And
just save yourself some time there.
Fill out your pilot profile, take your time, put all the stuff in there that you want, so you're not rushed at a race. But so we have a lot of pilots in here now, and I'll let Joel resume.
Yeah. So a lot of the software that race directors are used to, we will talk. We'll just talk about the elephant in the room. They're using live time, most likely.
Right.
And maybe a combination of setting up some of the race on MultiGP's site and then doing an import. We didn't do any of that, basically. We just kind of went around that and just said, we like those tools. Not really. Let's have a fresh approach and take a look and see what makes more sense here. So to be clear, the interface I'm going to show you is designed specifically for kind of a technical stuff. It's really early on in the UX and UI department. So there's going to be a lot of changes over the next month to make this more usable, but you can get an idea of where we're at. So I made one heat, and I've assigned Captain Vanover, Heads Up, Nurk, and Jet into it. And normally if I wanted to add another pilot, I could just drag them around. Oh, I took Jet out of there. I'll go down and find him. Now I've pre-configured my typical 4 slots for my frequencies, E2, et cetera. And we put this information in there so that a fan who may be on site and are following along in the app will know what frequency everyone is on. I've also configured, which stream, so the encoded stream is going to be able to, what they're assigned to in the system. So if you're on site, you can actually tune in to the FPV feed specifically on your iPhone or Android device, and you can even go into a cardboard mode and put it up on your face and fly along just like you would with normal goggles.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a great idea.
That is cool.
So we've now empowered a room full of, let's say, 150 people to just grab their phones, download the app, and tune into Captain Vanover flying. And they get to experience and ride along with him using their phone. They don't have to get the goggles. There's no frequency management. It's all just a couple taps away inside an app in real time. I mean, it might be about a 3-second delay for them, but for the most part, it's as close to real time as they're going to get with that. So that was a really fun feature that we were able to get into the system that unfortunately it doesn't get used as much as I'd like to see it, but I think that might change eventually. So then we have the whole ability to set up odds. I'm working on automating this whole system, but I can say, Vanover's 3-to-1 odds, and Jet has probably an 8-to-1 at this point. Nurk's a little bit better. We'll give him a 6-to-1, and he's probably a 2-to-1. So you can use those odds, save that out, and inside the app, they're, fans are going to see those odds, and they'll be able to actually use that to influence their picking as they choose who they think is going to win. As I get more data into the system, that entire odds generation will be automated using Monte Carlo simulations and everything. So that's been done in prototype, but it's not in the app yet. So, but you can specify the type of the heat, how many points you want to give away for the fans to play with, what their minimum picks are and what the maximum, and then we have different types of betting to go from there. You come through, we can even assign rewards. So again, this is all about fan engagement. So this isn't, there's going to be some features in here that are going to be very different than what you'd experience in live time. So we can set up rewards. It's all set up for digital delivery as well. So you can have URLs with codes that are baked in. You can change the method of delivery, whether it's a raffle method or if we have, if you were giving away like 15 of them, those different things. And so you can basically have an automated system for giving away fun prizes, whether it's, a $5 Starbucks gift card that you can redeem on your phone immediately, or it's, a Tiny Whip Racer that you have to put a code in on their website that gets shipped to you, or it's a backpack that you have to be on site to pick up, and you can flag that as well. So the system is also intelligent enough to know if a fan is playing along, whether they're actually at the race or whether they're playing online. And so then we can isolate the different types of prizes to the different types of people that are playing. Nice. So if you're on site, you're eligible for these types of rewards because I don't want to ship it to you.
Yeah, I know that.
If you're online, you can absolutely get this. And so this was, one of those critical things for the Tiny Whip Invitational and the multi-GP stuff. We had different types of prizes, and we're able to correctly give those rewards out to the right people. We move through a few states. You start the heat. Eventually, you get the results. Again, this is a very rudimentary UI still. So, but once you're in there, that's really it. I mean, you run that process, and then once you're moving on to the next one, just either duplicate or create a new heat, and drag your pilots around. You can go back and do different ones, and the whole process then sends out notifications to the app for the fans that are playing. They know when they have time to quickly make their picks before it actually starts, because you don't let them choose who they think is going to win after it started.
Right.
And then they get notifications when it's over and how many points they won, and it goes from there. So, I mean, that's kind of the heat management, race management side. But on top of that, we talked a lot about the production tooling. And so this screen is what Marty and I are typically staring at throughout the course of a night. And I can come through and we have an entire system where you can upload slides, like just typical PowerPoint slides. You can put all that in. Videos, if you have things you want to play up on the screen or on the live stream. We have, let's pull this one in. We have different, you don't get to see the output. This is actually like the control center. So usually you're hooked up with an HDMI out to the venue system, or this is what is going out to the live stream. And so this is like different baseball cards that we can go through. We can go through the different leaderboards for the pilot leaders and the fan leaders. And this one is my favorite one. It's not going to show it right now, but you can kind of see that it's 4 screens here. And it's basically your 4-up or 6-up or 8-up screen. And it's all a touch interface. So you get to actually pick and choose who you think is the most interesting FPV pilot at the time and really help a fan focus in on them. So traditionally, and today, most FPV races is a static 4-up or 8-up or 6-up or however many. The screens never change. And you're just basically expecting the spectator to know who to watch for the course of the event. I think once you become like a more sophisticated spectator, you can do that because you know what's going on and you have the ability to kind of context switch in your brain. But for somebody who's never seen drone racing before, that is nothing but chaos. It is completely unwatchable. And so one of our first things that we tackled was the idea of trying to let Marty, as he's calling the race, enlarge one of the FPV screens so that the spectators knew what to watch. Watch Captain Vanover. He is killing it. He's doing a great one. Heads Up and Jet are slow. They've crashed out, and Nurk is barely alive. It's like they're not interesting to watch. Let's watch Captain Vanover. Marty's desperate to chime in here.
Keep going.
Okay. So the interface is very simple. You just tap on who you think is most interesting and come back out, and you can switch between the 4-up. You can reorganize them, add different ones, and this is all done through an iPad. So it helps you kind of drive that. I'll tip our hand a little bit. We want to automate this process as well. And so I'm writing some AI, and we have patents in process around this as well that will help basically automate the entire switching, as we call it, of those FPV feeds in real time. So that way you don't have to have a Joe Scully up there trying to do more than just call it. He can just call it as he sees it, and the system will take care of the switching for him. Now, we have gotten feedback from pilots they don't like that. But again, we're not designing this specifically for pilots, number one. We're going for the fans. So pilots, I'm sorry, you're going to have to deal with this if we want to grow the sport together. So that's just my disclaimer.
I agree.
Yeah. And so on top of this, we can also pull in feeds from all the different devices. So if you have the Hydra app, this is a feature that's rolling out here in the next couple of months. I've done some prototyping on it, but you'll be able to be linked into the system, and every single device at the venue suddenly becomes a remote camera for me to feed and pipe into the system as well. So now we can do pilot interviews, selfie interviews, etc. And you can have your roaming cameras or whatever, all using the phones that are already on the spot. Marty mentioned it earlier, the idea of drones and phones. We take that to heart. We have these $1,000 devices sitting in our pockets that have incredible cameras. Why do we need to go out and buy, another $1,000 camera? It's just as good for all intents and purposes. We're not trying to put on a DRL race here. We're trying to bring drone racing to the masses. We have to find a scalable solution, and let's use the tech that we have.
That's excellent. Yeah, it's amazing.
So that can all be achieved through all of the software. So all of this goes to show, where's this other one? I'm stuck on this one. Yeah, so here's like all the profiles, the profile area, which Marty alluded to earlier with like the baseball cards. So, Captain Vanover, this is all stuff that he put in for, the Tiny Invitational. He started flying when he was 10 years old. He's only 19.
Did you know he was colorblind? He's colorblind.
And he's colorblind, I mean, these are fun, interesting things that people always ask about. Like, what goggles are you wearing? I'm HDOs. I use a rapid fire VRX. I'm flying the B-Brain Light, which was, a huge score for B-Brain at the Invitational. He showed up, and I asked him afterwards, and he was like, yeah, I flew it for about 12 packs before I had done it, before he got up and just killed everyone. So that's just a testament to how amazing that kid is. But, it's all these different types of things that we pull together and try and put it into a very simple touch interface to help you manage, move through a production, and move through an event to make something that's far more high quality than we are currently experiencing on the FPV production market right now.
Well, I want to touch on a couple things. We went quickly through the leaderboard. One of the most exciting things we've found is once we moved down from the paper tickets, pilot picking through paper tickets, which I described earlier, and when the app was ready for both iOS and Android and everybody could switch to the app, now we could create a dual leaderboard. So the pilot leaderboard, which we always had, lives on the left, but on the right, it's all the fans that are playing and their point totals and their jockeying for position. I've heard some pilots talking about it at some of our races, but it's the fan leaderboard that's creating all the excitement. And in some ways, the pilots are like, man, the fans are getting more attention than we are, right? Because they're the ones playing along. It makes it a truly interactive experience when you're not flying a drone. You're watching these drones in the air, but you're playing along on your phone and you see yourself up on the big screen because you're just as involved in many ways as the pilot. So the dual leaderboard has been a big deal. Joel is usually monitoring how the picks are coming in, and we're able to riff a little bit in the announcing on, hey, everyone's picking Vanover on this, but we got a couple people picking Nurk, it's going to be a big swing on the fan leaderboard if Nurk takes this one, stuff like that. It makes it interesting and exciting in a whole new way. The other thing is with the FPV feeds, we've experimented a lot with that. The 4-up is hard to watch, as Joel mentioned, if you're not used to it. We show 4-up sometimes, but we do this 1 and 3. We point people's attention to the feed that we think they should be seeing. We like second place. Second place gives that great follow shot, right? That looks like Star Wars. But we've also found the video on the screens at our events can often play a supporting role. We realized along the way, if you didn't differentiate quads in the air, these tiny whoops that were flying over your head, the pilots are bringing their own quads. So one thing that we adopted and we are religious about is we need to differentiate the quads in the air. So when the pilot has a color, their quad is glowing in that color. That's not always fun for the pilots. It's a hassle. It's being made easier by this new board that newbies built, right? With the RGB LED in there. We're rejoicing about that.
You can't tell I'm a huge fan of newbie drone. So,
but we want this thing watchable in the air. That is very rare, more rare than I ever realized until I got out into the world and saw some other races. But the fans at our events, they're watching the quads in the air. That finish line matters because they're actually seeing red just eclipse blue at the finish gate. Like they're seeing that and they know who was who and they know who they picked. So this color coding is carried out through everything, through how the pilots are seen in our system when fans are picking, the border around their FPV feed as that's shown on our screen, and then the color that their quads are glowing in. So I just wanted to mention that depending on the course, some courses are all line of sight for the fans and some are not, so when the quads disappear around a corner, then the FPV feeds become more important. But our fans really like to watch those things in the air now that they can tell who's who.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And, going through this process of you explaining to me everything, what I've noticed, and you guys can chime in on this, is that I think you guys have a very, laser focus in right now on micro racing because you can control so many factors. You can control the size of the venue, how close you are to the course. You can also, take advantage of a lot of the tiny whip technology that's coming out, making it easier to differentiate. And just in general, it's easier to manage a tiny whip race. Would you say, like your first product, rollout is really geared towards micro drone racing and then maybe expanding to, the larger quads out there?
I'll jump in and say that we got started with whoops indoors. We love how intimate that racing experience is for the fans. It's a little bit crazy. It's a little bit like, I can't believe drones are flying over my head. That one might hit me. That might fall out of the sky, but everyone quickly realizes that they're safe. That as a fan experience in this new sport that we're trying to figure out what about this sport is going to make it awesome for people. They can follow them in the air. They're safe if they get hit. It creates some excitement and some intrigue. We have done an outdoor race. Well, actually, we were certainly a part of the multi-GP championship. We did a big outdoor race here in Minnesota at a horse racing track. But we had to allow for some distance for the fans. We put up some nets.
So we put up a shit ton of nets.
Yes, we bought a lot of nets. Sorry.
I know the feeling.
And we told people, stay back from the nets. These nets are there to show you that you shouldn't get too close. People were just like up against these nets. Like they just wanted to get as close as they could. The pilots were like, I was zooming by these people, at an ungodly speed. And I'm like, what are you doing so close to me? Like, we're really trying to get close. So we've definitely, we're certainly not exclusive to whoops. We're believers in how approachable and accessible the sport becomes when you race that format. But we can do this across all formats, X class, everything.
Yeah, that said, that outdoor race we held, we still enforced color coding. So we have 12 pilots or 10 pilots? I think we did 10. I think it was 5 up at a time. And so we had, 2 groups and each of them had their red, blue, yellow, green, purple, or orange. I forget what it was. But everyone had their colors that they were assigned. And then, we did have to switch a little bit at the end, as we get down into the groups. But it was still fantastic. We did it at night. And just had the lights on for the horse tracks to get visibility for the pilots, but they still lit up. The quads were just decked out in LEDs like you would expect like a DRL racer to look. And so you could follow, low fly in purple across the whole, I think it was yellow, but you could follow him across the whole course as he's flying around in front of you. And so it became watchable, which, and not to knock on multi-GP, because we love multi-GP and we love, everything about that. But if we went and watched the championship races, nobody was watching the drones out the doors, right? Everyone was watching the FPV screens because that's the only way it was even remotely watchable. I had no idea who was who when you just looked out to the race course field. Unwatchable from a line of sight perspective, and so that's
normal.
Yep, and when you say that's normal, that's where we want to change normal. Like,
right.
So that's kind of where we're at.
I completely agree with that because, like, me and Elvin, we both watch a lot of drone racing, and we only really, let's be honest, like, for us, we only pay attention at the top 16. Before then, we're smart enough to know it's like, we'll interview some pilots, but like what goes on at that duration, not very interesting. So all of us get it, but you have to accumulate enough time to understand that. And that's something that I think you guys are beating by introducing this fan base system. My first question was about whoops versus the larger quads. As we go up in size in quads, there are more difficult challenges to tackle. Are you guys looking at that to make sure that you can actually account for those things? Because I'm sure you understand the difficulties once drones get larger and how hard it is to continue to make it look more entertaining.
Yeah, and so that's really where it comes down to the venue. And there are just going to be some times a day that aren't going to be interesting. But we have a fan and crowd first perspective. We try and go to where the crowd is right now because drone racing is so niche. People haven't really discovered it. If you say, hey, we're holding a drone race out, at an empty farm field, no one's coming. No one knows what it is. No one's going to show up just to watch, right? Unless you're the sister of the boy who's flying and your parents drug you there, right? I mean,
or the brother, because
right. So you're not. Yes, fair point of it. But you are not showing up to go watch a drone race. And so, part of our journey here over the last year and a half has been to go to where the crowd is. We show up to where there's 50 people already, and we tell them, congratulations, you're about to watch a drone race. Oh, and by the way, you get some cool stuff along the way, prizes, $1 off drinks, whatever. And then they're like, that was fun. When do you guys do this again? We're like, we're here every Tuesday night. We're here. Really? And they show up again next Tuesday night. And the next Tuesday.
Oh, man, I get drunk on Mondays.
Oh, yeah. All right. Moving on.
4 months later, we've established a fan base. And then we tell them, all right, we're no longer flying at this venue. We're going to go to this other one. And they come along. They come to us. And so that's what we're discovering. And so, the larger scope, the bigger challenges of X-Class and 5-inch and maybe even 3-inch, indoors, outdoors, spring, summer, fall, winter. Yeah, those are all going to be problems. But without a crowd to come watch it, they're irrelevant to us. And so it's one of those things where we're aware of it and we are looking at it. And Marty, maybe talk about Phoenix Cup next week. And how what's going on there and how we're approaching that project.
Yeah, we're talking with the organizers of the Phoenix Cup. That's coming up, currently scheduled for, I believe it's March 7th, 8th, 9th. So if you're interested in that event, it looks like we will be offering our fantasy pilot picking through our app at that event. It's an outdoor format. It's 5 inches, but it starts during the day. It goes into night with their gates that light up at night. We're involved in an outdoor race. We're involved in a 5-inch race coming up real soon. I think one of the things that is part of what Joel's talking about and part of who we are, what is the ideal setting for a drone racing fan experience? There are a bunch of existing structures that we can experiment with. So we've flown around sports bars, we've flown around tap rooms, we've flown around a children's museum with tiny whoops. So we can adapt to settings like that. We've flown in a movie theater, in kind of an old school single screen movie theater, where the pilots were all sitting in front of the giant movie screen and the FPV feeds were up on the movie screen and everybody was facing them sitting in the theater, and we had gates throughout the theater. So that was interesting. Everybody was facing one direction like you do in a movie theater. The FPV was giant and the quads, the whoops were flying everywhere. When you start getting into the bigger formats, there are soccer stadiums and baseball stadiums and hockey arenas, all of which were designed for everybody to be kind of facing inward and seeing something happening in the middle. And then you've got racetracks like the horse track we were at. We had 500 people, by the way, at that horse track event. Wow. And that was billed as hey, come see the drone race. There were no horses that night. It was just us. That was really cool to see that many people come out. We didn't go around the whole track. The 5 inches, I was advised, I had to be told, can't do that, Marty. That's going to burn up the batteries. It's going to be too much.
We might make one lap.
So we went back kind of in the front side of the track, and told people to back away from the nets. I'm not convinced. I once heard about a drone orchestra. In my days in advertising, I was the innovation lead, and I was always trying to hear about all the crazy cool things happening out in the world. So this hasn't been figured out yet. And we are really excited to try a lot of things and figure that out, because it's not just about where pilots can fly and what's a good spot for them. It's factoring in the viewers. How are they going to see the FPV feeds? How are they going to get the best view? How is it going to be safe? All challenges, but really exciting challenges.
I don't expect you guys to have all of the answers, because if you are, you'd all be, billionaires and getting acquired by DRL by now.
Steve Jobs.
Anyways, but it is interesting on how you actually approach this. We've talked, me and Elvin, long and hard about how we need to have systems where it's a fan-first approach, because largely as a drone racing hobby, profession, industry, whatever you like to call it, we've been very pilot focused, and that has hurt the innovation on the fan engagement side. We've been saying this for a while now, but we're glad that there is actually a team out there that's, trying to handle this challenge. And it seems like you're having a lot of success, because 500 people showing up just to watch a drone race, I consider that a big success, okay? Because that is hard to do. There's only one time I've ever seen that, and we were at a NASCAR event, and there were 300,000 people already there, okay? So
drone racing's NASCAR for kids, by the way. So
yes,
we'll be there.
Okay, so that's one of the things I was getting on, try to figure out how to ask these questions without infringing on anyone. But the thing is that how are you looking at this betting option? I mean, it's fantasy right now, and the goal is to what in the end with this type of betting?
If you play any of the races on our app right now, it's points and prizes, right? So we spot you points when you check in to a race. You get to bets, but it's not real money. On each heat that you want to play, you can decide how confident you are, how many points you want to put down on your picks. Depending on how well you make those picks, you get multipliers on your points, or you lose them. As Joel was showing in our Director app, we can assign prizes on a heat-by-heat basis. We always have a grand prize, an overall winning fan at the end of the night who's ever at the top of the fan leaderboard. So it keeps people engaged throughout, just with points and prizes. We've actually, we designed it thinking, all right, we designed this with points. That can always change. That can always be converted into currency. But we're going to work out all the kinks, and we're going to perfect it with points for now as these rules are changing. And as you probably saw, last year, the Supreme Court opened the door for sports betting to become legal in all the states, and all the states are trying to figure that out right now. We've got great people that we collaborate with here in the Twin Cities, other startup founders, and people that are experts, and also tracking closely with that changing landscape. We happen to be in Minnesota, where they're figuring some things out. Different states are allowing different levels of fantasy. Some states have really are showing the way and leading the way with actually adopting betting. So it's our job, because we are excited about this, and because we really want to bring this to the fans, and we know that the fans are wanting this. The fans want to be able to get the most out of this racing sport, and so we're not shying away from getting into all those details and figuring out what we can do where, and having location awareness in our app so that you can play it certain ways if you're watching from this state versus that state. There's points and prizes right now. There's a fantasy dynamic that is possible and allowable that works as well. And then as the rules change, and they will, and people know that sports betting is coming thanks to that Supreme Court ruling, we're going to be ready. We'll be right there. That's how we're playing it.
That's a large task too. I mean, really, to think about what you're doing, it's a huge task where you're going to have to manipulate your app or your software to bounce in and out of each state line, basically, you know what I mean? Like it's one thing about the United States is, every state does things differently, but along the same path, you know what I mean? So it's like here on the West Coast, we have California, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And, things usually work their way either up the coast or down the coast. So it either starts in Idaho and works its way down to California, or it works its way from California and works its way up to Washington, Idaho, and then into Canada, which is the other option. In the Northwest, each state plays those betting laws a little different. You know what I mean?
So basically what Elvin's saying is acquiring a lawyer into your team up on the list. No.
You're not wrong.
One with some big little pointy ears on each side.
Yeah, I mean, it is a monumental task. I don't think you're wrong on that. But I think if you look at what we've done so far, we're clearly not afraid of monumental tasks.
Definitely.
So let's go. And yeah, let's do it.
Just from what you have shown me, and also the experiences that you learned and adapting quickly to make sure that you continue to engage your audience, you definitely have the chops on the social side, and you definitely have the technical chops. So I say you have a pretty good chance. But all betting aside, I think it's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people, regardless of how you implement it, and staying on the legal side of the law. That's just something that you're just going to have to play by ear. But we look forward to seeing it.
Yeah. The good news is that we have seen tremendous engagement with points and prizes. And you don't have to give people much. It helps when there's cool prizes. We've had our race in December. We had a bunch of businesses and startups around the Twin Cities that wanted to get some visibility and give some stuff away, kind of a holiday showcase almost. And man, that room was electric. I mean, everybody there was playing and checking their phones and jumping back into their phones after every heat to pick the next heat. It was really remarkable. So, a good collection of prizes. All of this is a tremendous brand platform, by the way. That's another thing that this is the world that I come from. But talk about a native advertising. You've got short race heats. You've got breaks, natural breaks between those heats. The leaderboard updates that come between all heats. Those breaks can be filled with messaging, with videos, commercials. You've got an entire race course that can have branded elements throughout. In this points and prizes, offer up something cool and make it something that everybody aspires to win. And then we have our app, and the app is where everybody is following along with everything. And you can have messaging in the app. You can have coupon codes in the app. You can display ads that click to experiences. So I don't know that people realize just how exciting of a branding opportunity and all the roles that brands can play in these events. And the prizes are one really exciting facet of that.
And I want to jump in here with a quick point. I know some people will be turned off by the idea that we're throwing in advertising and everything here. Just because of what it is. But one of my core visions around Hydra has been, I want to make professional pilots professionals. Like, we have some crazy good pilots out there, but the only people who are being paid and can quit their day job to go fly for a living are the 10, 12 pilots on DRL. And even half of them aren't even getting paid enough, right?
True.
So is there a place where we can see pilots getting to a point to where they can fly for a living and just, hone their skills and make it an actual sport? Think NASCAR, like I'm driving this car around the track or Indy, whatever, as a driver. What's on my car? I mean, it is stickered to the hilt. I mean, that thing is nothing but a walking advertisement, driving advertisement, right? And so I really want to like reframe this idea that we're selling out to advertisers or different things, and really think about these are the companies that are going to empower us to actually do this for a living and do this full time, which is, as a pilot, should be something that you should want to do. Who does not want to get paid to go fly around a racetrack for a living? Even if you can go to a race a couple times a week and get paid $50, $100 to go fly, that's good beer money for the month, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I honestly believe that there is opportunity here to reinvigorate the sponsorship model, which I know has kind of fallen off a cliff in the last couple of years. Yeah. But I think, that cliff, they were really targeting, I think they maybe overpromised and underdelivered is basically what ended up happening. And so we're here to kind of step back. Let's reevaluate the situation and let's charter a path out of this valley, and let's figure out how to make this, sponsorable again. And a lot of that sponsorship money will come back when we have the fans.
Yeah.
Without the fans, you're just preaching at the choir the whole time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've been preaching.
You gotta fill those pews. You gotta fill those pews, man. And so, that's what we're trying to do. Fill the pews. The sponsors will come back. The sponsors come back. Everyone gets paid, and everyone gets paid to have fun and do what they love to do. Now, that said, what we've run into a few times is that there's a clear difference between people who look at drone racing as a hobby and people who look at it as a sport. Mm-hmm. We are interested in the pilots who think of it as a sport. We love the hobby side. We love STEM education. We love all those different things, and we're working in all those different areas as well, as I think every FPV company is. There's always ways to foster the pilot community, but our core product is really going to be focused a lot more towards the people who look at this as a sport and not a hobby. So I just make that clear.
And look at the esports space. You got these esports teams with managers and trainers, and where is all that? Where are all those resources coming to run these esports teams? It's the sponsors. It's the advertisers. Right. And so, and they got a bunch of people watching that stuff.
And I'll say this: I don't think you guys are doing wrong in that department. Like you need to inquire some type of advertisement thing so that you can promote yourself. We know that running a media company or a company period is a very costly thing. Moving two people into a room can mean you got to fly across the country and be to work certain things out, or to get two skilled individuals in a room, you got to fly them there, and I don't think what you're doing is the wrong way to do this. I think there's so much opportunity in advertisement, especially when you have your own app, you know what I mean? Like that gives you a larger doorway, I believe, when you have the app, instead of you have to tie it on to another app or pay your way in, which is what most things that we have to do today. And having your app means that you've already paid your way in, and hopefully you've supplied yourself a doorway to utilize the time that you're not doing anything. The flashes between heats, the flashes in between the pilot acknowledgments, and talking about the pilot background, posting, graphical stuff. And in the end, that's going to open up that CG opportunity too. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity. I have like a billion things I want to talk about, but we're an hour and a half in, so I'm going to cut it short with just one or two more questions, and then we're just going to have to.
You guys have us back anytime.
Yeah, we can go for part two. So, You said a lot of interesting things in there because, when you get into, wanting to be focused in on, the people that see it as a sport, there's a bit of training that needs to go on there. There's definitely revenue sharing that you're going to have to hash out. Advertisers have to be comfortable with what you're doing in this space along with betting. There's so many things, but along with all that stuff means opportunity, and I think that's what you're seeing, and that's what you're focused in on, and that's what we like to hear. But you're basically at like step 3, and the mountain's that way, and it's about 1 million steps. That's the problem. But let me ask you this,
maybe further along than you think. I'll say that.
Okay, you're step 50. I don't know, but So let me ask you this. Obviously, you've talked a lot about the ideas that you're, cooking up right now, and I see, there's usually a triangle, right? You have the people that are flying, you have your audience, and then you have the people with the money. So we'll just call them advertisers, just to make it short. And that's the magic triangle. You're in the middle, trying to actually get all of them to talk to each other and be nice to each other. That's the hard job, right? How do you see this balance happening? I mean, like, is there like, do you attack one first? Is it a balance of attacking all of them? Like, how do you do this? Like, is there a strategy involved in this that you talked about?
Well, first we had to create an enjoyable experience for spectators. We had to take what was happening with the pilots. We had to get pilots to come along with us and follow with our format experimentation. But what they were getting from us that they weren't getting otherwise was people cheering for them, people watching. They got to walk out like they were on a talk show. We got or coming out of the tunnel at a football game. We make a big deal when we introduce them. So the pilots were able to. They allowed us some of these things that we put them through, colored LEDs on their quads and everything, in exchange for this, feeling like a rock star. Feeling like a sports star. That's working so far. We didn't expect, when we were out at the Invitational, the Tiny Whoop Invitational in Colorado, all the pilots had to get the app because we had to get their pilot profiles into our system. There were no spectators allowed at Jesse's place. There was only by invitation, just pilots flying that amazing course. As Joel mentioned, if you have not seen what Dean and the guys in Colorado did, that course is just amazing. And there's videos flying around online. You got to check that out. But it was pilots only in that room. And all of a sudden, during practice heats, pilots were like cheering. Practice heats. They were all playing. They were all picking. I did not expect the pilots to be picking, but they all had the app because they had to create their profile, right? So the pilots are even having fun getting into the things that we've been creating for the fans. So we started with the fans. The pilots are seeing the light. I think they see hope and promise in what we're doing, turning this into a spectator experience, into a great sport to watch. They're becoming believers. We tell them about the senior citizens. We tell them about, the bikers who are watching and cheering and they've never flown, and they're saying, wow, it is possible. Then the brands will come when the people are there. When the brands see, and again, this is the world I come from. I know there was a big hype spike, early on, and these big events happened, and brands got lured in by the excitement of flying quadcopters with cameras and racing around fast. I wasn't around for any of that. I'm not dragged down by any of that. I'm coming in fresh. I see an amazing native advertising opportunity. Natural breaks. You don't have to do an artificial break like you got to do a commercial break during an NBA game or a typical sporting event. You got natural breaks. You got a whole canvas of a race course that you can design really cool things that people will appreciate. The pilots will appreciate something cool that you can fly through or around. That's inspired by a brand. The brands will recognize all these opportunities, but we're also going about this a little bit differently. We're not going the DRL route. DRL and got on cable TV and went for that big television play right out of the gate. We're going a little more long tail. We're going a little more, let's get races in all these towns. Let's build up the pilots that are local. Let's get people coming out and seeing it in person. And we can do that at scale. Our system is designed to allow that at scale. So you could look at it almost as the farm league, the minor leagues. DRL kind of started on ESPN. But we're going to build a groundswell around this format, the things we figured out, the engagement we're creating, and we think the brands will come. So that's my answer to your triangle question.
I didn't expect the answer, by the way, but I figured I'd try. you got anything? You got anything, Joel, to add to that?
Marty's very smart. That's what I'll add. He tooted my horn a little bit, so I'm going to toot his. I didn't even know this about him until about 4 or 5 months ago, but he's actually the brains behind the herding cats commercial from 1999 Super Bowl commercial.
Oh, it's you.
That's him. You're talking to the guy who directed it.
No, I produced it. I was a young producer.
Whatever you want to say, Marty, but it's his brainchild. So
he only got $50 for it. That's what we're gonna hear.
It's nice that is still remembered. That was it was one of the first things I did early in my career. I produced it with some amazing creatives and an amazing director. But yeah, it's nice to be known for one of the memorable Super Bowl.
You're gonna have to play that in the loop.
Play that in the loop. Oh dear, it's probably copyrighted. We can't do that. Anyways,
EDS isn't around anymore. That client's not around anymore.
So all right. Last question, and then we're going to start wrapping up. We're hour and 30 in. So let's just say I'm organizing races. I listen to this podcast. I'm sold. How do I get started?
If you go to HydraFPV.com, we have an announcement banner at the top talking about our race kit, our FPV race kit. So there is a form, if you click on that you can fill out, and that is where we're building our list of the first customers that will be getting this race kit and that can create races where they live, activating their pilot communities to start racing in front of people and becoming and creating fans of those people. So I recommend going to HydraFPV.com, finding the race kit form. We've had a tremendous response to that already, and all those folks are in line for getting this kit when it's ready to start distributing. You can certainly follow along with everything we're doing. We're on all the social channels. We're just Hydra FPV everywhere: YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram. On Facebook, we have a group that is a private group, but you can request access, and we'll gladly let you in. That was a Jesse Perkins recommendation, by the way. He's like, you guys got to create a group on Facebook. And if you look at Jesse, he's all about the groups on Facebook. But
he owns the largest group.
Yeah.
It's called the Hydra FPV Drone Racing Casino Lounge, I believe. Right? He was just so enamored with what we were doing at the invitation. He's like, you got to call it the Casino Lounge. So look up.
Getting you in trouble already.
Yeah.
We're having fun with it. So I'm pretty dedicated to putting in all the races that people should know about that are going to be playable in our app up in the Casino Lounge. So follow us on all the social platforms. But then our app has the schedule. So if you want to be a race director, you want to put on a race, if you're a pilot, if you're part of a multi-GP chapter, and you know a lot of pilots and you want to give this a try, not in the back room, but on the main stage, check out that race kit that you can find on our site. But if you just want to keep track of all the things we're doing and all the places that are using our system, get our app. There's a full schedule in there. It's just Hydra FPV in the App Store, in the Android Play Store. In there, you just create an account, and you can check all the ones that you want to be notified, all the events you want to be notified about. And we also have a Discord channel. So if you know what Discord is, maybe you're a gamer, you want to interact with us that way, you can get to our Discord channel through our app as well. So there's lots of ways to reach out. We live in this great era where a modern brand is available to people like this. So we like to be available and definitely reach out. We love hearing from people who are interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, I hang out on Discord a lot with voice chat, and we'll answer questions or just jump in and chat for a while if you want to ask questions about what's going on, different feature ideas, those different things. So Discord is probably the best place to get a hold of me. And again, I do all the software development for the iOS side of things. Then I have my Android guy sits behind me, and he does all the Android work. So
Android, iPhone, all you have to do is search in the App Store, Hydra FPV, and you will find the app.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, there you go. So definitely go in there, download it, and poke around, see if there's a race near you. And if there's not, maybe you can bet remotely. And what? Okay.
Make one, damn it.
Oh, make one. Oh,
that's right. Make a race near you, and you can watch them all live streaming. I mean, all our races in Minnesota are live streams, so you can watch the stream. Don't have to be there in person, but yeah,
still win stuff. Still win stuff.
You can still win stuff, but I agree with Elvin. Yeah, go make a race. Use our system.
Go make a race. Use our systems. All right, we're cutting out, folks. We are hour and 40 minutes in. Wow. We will have part 2 sometime, because there's still a whole lot of stuff I want to ask.
Talk about.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more to talk about. We'll get them to spill their secret sauce. No, not really. The secret sauce to any great business is experience. Okay, you got to be in there. You got to hustle. And then you got to go build it. That's the secret sauce to entrepreneurship. That's what I've learned. All right,
Don't just build it. They're not gonna come.
Man, negativity over there. All right, folks.
You got to build something they want, and then they'll come. Right?
Okay.
It's not just build something. It's building something they want. And I got a feeling that people.
You got 2 minutes. I'm kicking you off.
If you know who Paul Graham is, he created Y Combinator. It's the great startup accelerator program. I went through that a number of years ago. I got the T-shirt. The T-shirt says, "Make something people want." It's as easy as that. Make something people want.
Right.
True enough. All right, Elvin, are you done? All right, Elvin's done. All right, we are done for the week. Thank you so much. We appreciate both of you coming on, spending 2 hours with us, and we will definitely have part 2 sometime in 2019.
Thank you so much for having us, you guys. We appreciate it.